Please have a seat. And okay, welcome everybody to Red Talk. In fact, while we've had talks before, I think this is the first official Red Talk. So you are inaugural listeners to our inaugural speaker, and welcome also to anyone who might be down the line on WebEx from around the world. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Kenzo Oshima. I think Japan is in our hearts and minds nowadays. Every day we are thinking of Japan, and for reasons you know. And it's a great pleasure to have Kenzo here. Kenzo is the Senior Vice President of JICA, which is the Japan International Cooperation Agency, and I'm sure Kenzo will tell us about it in a moment. And if there is a person who knows something about humanitarianism, it must be him. By the way, he's not just the Senior Vice President of JICA. I learned today over lunch that he's also a Paramount Chief of Sierra Leone. So maybe we should also introduce him in that capacity as a Paramount Chief. And I think no one deserves that honor more than Kenzo. I think as a humanitarian himself, he's also original resident of Hiroshima. And so if anyone knows anything about humanity, then he does. And speaking to him personally, I know how much that experience from his early childhood and his subsequent career has meant. And he has been a distinguished diplomat for Japan, serving as in various diplomatic positions as ambassador. Recently, I think, most recently in Australia, and then he's headed various functions in the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he served in embassies in the US and in other places. Before coming to the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, which we all know, as the Emergency Relief Coordinator and Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. And it's in that capacity that I personally got to know him, and was privileged to work with him. And so I'm really glad to be here personally to greet him here. And then I think from OCHA, you went to serve as the Japanese ambassador and permanent representative at the UN, still in New York, before coming to your current position in 2007 as the Senior Vice President for JICA. If I can interpret the organogram of JICA, Senior Vice President actually means he runs JICA, so he's the boss. Not the kind of real boss, but the boss that makes the difference, the person who actually runs the show. So we're really looking forward to hearing from him. And what we have here, I think in the audience, Kenzo, and welcome to not just our staff, I can recognize many people here, but also friends and colleagues from diplomatic missions, other international organizations, and some students as well, I see. So I think you have the Geneva humanitarian community here waiting to listen to you. Kenzo.
Thank you very much, Mukesh, for that very kind introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kenzo Oshima, Senior Vice President of JICA. My boss at JICA, as you know, is Madame Ogata, who I think she's about 84 years old. Remains very, very strong and active. Travels a lot around the world for JICA's work, as well as for other international work. One problem I have with her is that I cannot complain in front of her about jet lag, the travel fatigue, and so on and so forth. She is the one that survives all this better than anybody else. Today, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you all for coming. When I first learned this, what you call RedTalk from Mukesh, my immediate reaction was, Oh no, I'm not a communist. I'm of course from the Cold War generation, and red rings something than what it is intended. But anyhow, I'm very happy to be here. Mukesh and I, as he just mentioned, had a very good relationship in our respective previous assignments. Particularly, he was helpful as Director General at DFID when I was Emergency Relief Coordinator at the United Nations. So I was very, very grateful, but very fortunately, since that time, the relationship somehow continued. He now works in a prominent position here at IFRC, and I at JICA. I'm very pleased that he has invited me to speak to you today. May I also take the opportunity to express my very deep, heartfelt appreciation to IFRC and to many of the people who are present here for the expression of sympathy and condolences, solidarity with regard to the recent catastrophe, earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear power plant accident. Those expressions is really something that gives us a lot of not only consolation but a great deal of encouragement, and particularly the role played by the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies all around the world have been very, very important. I know how important work that IFRC does, but particularly in connection with the recent disaster, this has been very much appreciated. So just want to take the opportunity to mention it. IFRC is now headed by a very prominent Japanese Mr. Konoe, who is one of the most respected person, a humanitarian in Japan. And the polity, the fact that someone like Mr. Konoe heads up this distinguished and eminent organization is, I think, another tribute to this very long-standing, well-recognized, respected organization. Today, I have no sort of well-prepared lecture. I do not think I really deserve the first inaugural speaker for this Red Talk. What I would like to do is perhaps, or what I am going to do is not a well-structured or well-prepared speech, but rather some rumblings, I'm afraid, and I hope you bear with it. I would like to touch upon three issues. First, a little bit about the disaster, and secondly, the meeting I just finished participating, and I'm sure there are among in this group some of the people who attended. It's a global platform on disaster risk reduction. So I'm going to briefly say a few things about it. And thirdly, and this is what Mukesh asked me to touch upon also, and that is Japan's development aid policy, or JICA's work in some respect. Now, for your reference, I have prepared and distributed to you some reference material in regard to these issues. I don't think I should waste your time going through these documents. Most of them are factual information about the disaster and about the global platform meeting, and also the ODA policy. Those of you who are interested enough in this, please have a look later on. And if you have any questions later on, then I'll be more than happy to respond the best way I can. So let me first touch upon the Great East Japan earthquake, as we have come to refer to officially to the recent disaster. Now, this is really what I might call a cascade of disasters, or cascading disasters. First, the big earthquake on the scale of 9 of magnitude, the mega earthquake, the fourth largest magnitude of earthquake in history, according to some statistics. Now, this mega earthquake then triggered a tsunami, inevitably. And tsunami had a really devastating effect. I'm sure most of you must have seen those horrible devastation widely reported on TVs. So this tsunami. Then tsunami very unfortunately hit a nuclear power plant located in that particular coastline on the northeast of Japan. Then the collapse of this nuclear power, they called Fukushima nuclear power plant number 2. Of course, there was radiation leaks. So there was another cascading effect. Obviously, when radiation leaks, then it creates another problems. The radiation effect on soil, fish product, and other agricultural product, and eventually those radiation problems affect the local community, obviously, as Chernobyl accident did many years ago in that part of the world. And then the northeast Japan had many small-scale or medium-scale industries, some of which really provided electrical parts or other industrial parts to many bigger companies, both in Japan and overseas, which affect then the industrial production to some extent in Japan, in Korea, in China, and in the United States, in other parts of the world, which depended on the supply of those parts that are produced in those areas. So there was a series of disaster going from one to the next and to the next. So I would call it a cascading effect, and this is really what has happened in the wake of the big disaster. Now, as you know, of course, Japan is a very much disaster-prone country throughout its history. The country has known many disasters, and particularly earthquake and tsunami. This is on record. So the country is generally very well prepared, or should be very well prepared for this kind of event. And Japan is not a developing country. It is an economically advanced and prosperous country, and huge amount of money, of course, has been invested in detecting earthquakes, in information dissemination of earthquakes when they strike, in communicating tsunami forecasts as soon as disaster takes place in Japan, you will see on TV screen within 3 minutes where the disaster, the earthquake happened, and whether there is going to be any tsunami, possible tsunami strikes. It comes within 3 minutes on TV screens, on radio and so forth. So in these respect, and also in terms of constructing hardware, infrastructure, like for instance, anti-tsunami dike, seawalls, billions of yen have been spent in the past. In fact, one of the dikes constructed in one of the areas heavily affected in the current earthquake is perhaps the best or the most well-advanced anti-tsunami dike. So it is a country that is, under normal circumstances, perhaps one of the best prepared in terms of disasters. This time, however, those hardware, infrastructure, and what you like, software, the early warning, evacuation, and so on and so forth, did not do their job fully in terms of preventing damages and so on and so forth. Because the magnitude of the earthquake and the magnitude of the subsequent tsunami were so much that they could not prevent. And the results are what we have seen. More than nearly 20,000 people missing or dead, and still 130,000 people became displaced and still have to live in evacuation centers and so on and so forth. And as far as the nuclear power plant is concerned, it is not still being brought under control fully yet. Engineers and workers are struggling every day to try and bring it under control and prevent further radiation leaks and so on and so forth. So the impact really has been such that it is indeed one of the most serious, biggest disasters for a country which even has had in its past so many and very serious. It's probably one of the worst. So it is indeed something that not only we suffer from, but something we think that we have to learn and take lessons from and do it very, very seriously. And this is exactly what the government have said it will do, and also said that Japan is going to share with the international community, with those countries which are interested, which are also disaster-prone, information and lessons learned. In the course of the global platform meeting, which just ended this afternoon, the minister, the deputy minister in charge of these disasters, came to Geneva to attend this global platform meeting and announced two things. First, Japan is prepared to host the third United Nations World Disaster Prevention Conference in 2015. You may remember the first such world conference took place in Yokohama, I think in the early 1990s. And second one took place in 2005 in Kobe, Hyogo Prefecture. I would like to come back to that later more. So the third one is proposed to be held in Japan in 2015. So that was one announcement that was made by the minister. And the second one was, before that conference, Japan is going to organize perhaps a smaller, more expert level meeting in order to share the findings, experiences, the lessons learned from this disaster with the rest of the world. And this is going to take place in 2012, next year. Now, the disaster affected not just one place, as it was the case during the Kobe earthquake of 1995. That was another major earthquake which struck the city of Kobe. About 7,000 people died. It was a very serious disaster, but the area affected was rather limited to one area. Whereas this time, the area affected both by earthquake and the subsequent tsunami are very, very wide indeed. It covers at least 3 prefectures and long coastlines stretching 300 to 500 kilometers. Both as a result of earthquake and tsunami, major infrastructure such as roads, communication links, railways were nearly totally destroyed. And in addition, the city halls, town halls, and those local community facilities and offices, many of them were destroyed, and people also were killed, the mayor and so forth. As a result, there was complete breakdown. The local communities and administration, many of them became dysfunctional. So the physical destruction as well as the destruction of these administrative capacity created a very difficult situation in terms of emergency relief, and that was really a nightmare for those who had to deal with out of Tokyo and on the ground. So it took a while, but now after about 2 months, roads were rebuilt or restored, railway lines, communication lines, electricity and so on and so forth have been more or less restored, and the affected region are now ready slowly to move from the emergency phase to the phase of reconstruction and recovery. And the catchword, of course, when we move to reconstruction, the catchword always is building back better. This was, I think, the catchword that was said often during the hurricane in the United States. This was the catchword that was referred again in the reconstruction of Aceh, Indonesia, at the time of the Indian Ocean tsunami. What is meant by building back better, of course, varies from one context to the next. But in Japanese case, it is certainly the case. We would not simply be putting things back to where they were before the disaster, but reconstruct the affected region in such a way that it will have a new society, new way of doing business and so on and so forth, to strengthen the capacity and going beyond putting things back to where they were at the time of disaster. Now, this spirit is something that needs to be cultivated, of course, and at the moment every effort is being made to think about how best the community, the local level, and the central government can put resources in terms of money, in terms of capacity, so that the affected communities, destroyed communities, can be brought back better, and do it in such a way that the disaster-prone country can learn some good lessons to prepare ourselves for the next possible disaster that might hit Japan sometime later. Another thing I might mention in this regard is the fact that much of the damage was in fact done not so much by earthquake as by tsunami. Tsunami is really something that is to be feared in terms of the extent of damage that it can cause. At the time of the Kobe earthquake in 1995, 80% of people died because of under the collapsed houses and so on and so forth. But this time, early accounts tell us that more than 90% of people who died were in fact lost their lives as a result of tsunami. Tsunami really leaves, as you must have seen on TV screen, a scene that reminds us of the war devastation. It simply swept away everything, and there are very, very few people who could survive. Once caught and once failed to escape the tsunami. So it's really the tsunami that caused such extensive devastation. Now, as far as the physical construction of infrastructure, seawalls, dikes, and so on and so forth, according to experts, they were not completely useless. They did prove some effect, good effect. They did produce some effect in not so much in preventing people from death, but in terms of slowing down the spread of tsunami. According to one estimate, it delayed the arrival of tsunami to villages and towns and communities to a great extent, which allowed people time to escape. So this was not completely useless, because some people seem to argue that putting in so much money, spending so much money in constructing those infrastructure was a waste of money. It can be argued both ways, but perhaps a better argument is, no, they are not useless. They did, in fact, contribute to saving lives by slowing down the force of tsunami and delaying the time of arrival. So these are some of the points which I'm sure are going to be looked into more closely by experts, and the local government and central government will have to learn what were the good lessons from these and what would be the measures that would be needed to protect from the community from future similar potential disasters. Regarding nuclear power plant accident, it was very unfortunate. The fact of the matter is, in fact, there are 3 nuclear power plants that are located in the affected region. one of them, Fukushima Daiichi, Fukushima first plant, was the one that collapsed. There are two other active nuclear reactors located in the same affected areas. Onagawa, one is Onagawa, and the other is Fukushima number 2. Those two reactors survived despite this huge earthquake. Those two nuclear power reactors survived the earthquake shock. They survived tsunami impact because those two reactors were constructed at a place with higher altitudes than the third one, the Fukushima number 1. So they were able to survive. They were able to survive the shock of magnitude 9. They were able to survive the shock of tsunami. But the one that's collapsed, unfortunately, was located at a lower altitude, which then the tsunami hit, and the safe fail measure failed in preventing, in ensuring the cooling system of the reactor. For one reason being that the breakwater that was constructed was not high enough to prevent the impact of tsunami. That was one reason, and there was another fail-safe failure in that in failing to ensure that double or triple measures needed. If one measure fails, then the second one kicks in. And if the second measure fails, then the third measure kicks in. That kind of anti-accident measure somehow did not exist for this particular disaster, and that was the reason for the collapse and this tragedy that is going on. So the cooling system failure was what exactly happened. So these are again another lessons that will need to be learned. But whatever the reason, the fact is that Japan has been dependent on power, on energy from nuclear sources to a tune of 30%. 30% of Japan's energy requirements are met by nuclear facilities, nuclear reactors. There is, at the moment in the country, a lot of argument going on in this regard, as you can very easily imagine. The anti-nuclear sentiment has always been strong in Japan, not least because of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also there's been a very strong anti-nuclear sentiment. One reason why there was not a breakwater built high enough. It was in fact 6.5 meters high. In fact, the height of tsunami that struck this breakwater was reported to be about 10 meters or more. So obviously the height of the breakwater built for this particular reactor was not high enough. Why did they fail to construct a breakwater that was high enough to prevent a potential tsunami that could reach 10 meters high or even higher? Why is it? It is a good question that is being asked, of course, and this needs to be looked into very, very carefully, and that I think is exactly what is going to happen. One argument that I heard is that there was some collusion among the so-called nuclear village people, meaning that the utility company, Tokyo Electric Power Company, government authority, in this case the Ministry of Industry and Trade, whose mission is to promote nuclear energy because it is an important source of energy supply, up to 30%, and the plan is to increase it even higher, up to 40% and so forth. So there is this government agency and also politicians, pro-nuclear politicians. So there is some kind of collusion among these nuclear power industry and government, and also including some nuclear scientists interested in the promotion of nuclear science and nuclear industry. So there was reportedly some collusion among these people, which made it difficult for them to talk to the local people, arguing about the risks. Because once you start talking about risks, then it will be very difficult to get the understanding of community people for constructing nuclear power site. So they apparently were somewhat lenient, lax in their attitude towards risks to be taken. So that was one argument. But whatever may be the reason, I think these issues will be some among many others that will be looked into, and we will know why there was this deficiency and there was this failure in taking the full safety measures. Now, one other things in regard to this is some of the rescue team that came from overseas in times of needs in Japan. In fact, this was rather a very interesting aspect. JICA, of course, is an internationally oriented organization which are normally involved in overseas development work. So when accidents and problems like this happen in the country, we are not, strictly speaking, mandated, or we are not responsible to be involved under normal circumstances. But the magnitude of the disaster was such that we had to, of course, do whatever we could as an organization. And JICA did, in fact, did certain things. And one of the things we did was to provide support to international rescue teams that came to Japan this time. And there were a few interesting things in regard. I mentioned this because some of you, I'm sure, are involved in this area of work. The 17 countries and Taiwan, one region, deployed search and rescue teams. And 3 countries deployed medical teams. Now, of the 17 countries that sent search and rescue teams, there were 3 countries which deployed search and rescue team overseas for the first time. India is one, Indonesia and Mongolia. Those 3 countries did this. And it is interesting to note that, as this example shows, there is an increasing number of countries in the Asian region and other regions, countries which are doing something in order to increase their capacity to help not only themselves in time of disaster, but help other countries as needed. So those are the 3 countries I mentioned, but I'm sure there may be others in similar position. This is an interesting phenomenon, and I, of course, am one who welcome this trend. More countries have more resources and make themselves available to the needs and requirements of other countries, including for developed countries, not just South-South kind of cooperation, but increase even for countries like Japan. The increase in the number of foreign search and rescue teams is a good thing, of course, but it could also create some problems in the sense that unless there is some, what shall I say, some form of coordination is brought, then that could create more confusion in times of disasters in affected countries when rescue teams come and put some pressure in the host country, in the host communities, and it certainly can happen. Some problems. So I think while the increase in the number of countries willing and ready to do this work is welcome, that would also, on the other hand, mean a greater need for the international community, such as perhaps INSARA, that comes under OCHA, to do some work in order to provide the necessary coordination and skill training kind of support. That's one thing that I noted among some other. So coordination and some standardization of skills may be necessary under United Nations Disaster Assessment System, UNDAC, or INSARAG. If you have questions later on, then I certainly would welcome, but I should stop there in talking about the disaster. Let me then move on to the global platform meeting just ended today. It has a very interesting 4-day meeting on for disaster risk reduction. This is organized by the ISDR Secretariat, as you know. I used to be in charge of ISDR along with OCHA when I was with the United Nations as Emergency Relief Coordinator, starting in 2001. When I arrived in New York to take charge of ISDR and OCHA, ISDR had just came into being, and it was still in its infancy. So coming back to this global platform meeting of ISDR, I'm really very pleasantly surprised with the expansion, growth, and very active participation of so many actors involved in disaster reduction, disaster prevention, disaster work. I was really, really impressed because I know from my own experience what it was back in 2001. In fact, in 2001, the ISDR has just came into being, and one of my first jobs was to appoint the director in charge of ISDR, interviewed and selected Salvano Briceño, whom I'm sure you know. He did very good work to help ISDR grow. And one day, shortly after Salvano was appointed to the position, he came to see me in New York, looking a bit green, and said, "Mr. Oshima, we are short of money." At that time, ISDR office was about 14, 15 people at most. So he came to see me and plead me. You are from Japan, Mr. Oshima, can you talk to the Japanese government to get some emergency funding so that I do not fire some people? So I called Tokyo. Tokyo was not particularly helpful. So what do? I remembered one very kind word from the Swiss SDC, Ambassador Fust and Tony Frisch, who had come and seen me earlier on and assured me that Mr. Oshima, your job is going to be a bit difficult, but Switzerland is of course a country that is very, very much humanitarian, dedicated. We would like to help you and support you any time you need me. Please don't hesitate to call me or to come to see us. So I remember that kind word. So Salvano and I rushed to Bern to explain the difficult financial situation for about 2 hours. And then at the end of the talk, Ambassador Fust said, "Okay, we understand you. Next week you have in the ISD account $500,000. And also we agreed that we will go ahead and establish ISDR support group, which Ambassador Tony Frisch agreed to chair." So that's how, back in 2001, almost 10 years ago, the ISDR was and how it survived a difficult time to grow into what it is today. So it's really a very, very pleasant surprise to find ISDR flourishing, at least in terms of the number of participation and the quality of work that I see and the potential that it has achieved. Nearly 3,000 people attended, and two most notable things that happened at this time was first, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and Deputy Secretary General Migiro both came. And I think someone who knows a little bit about how the UN works, I think it's rather rare for both the Secretary General and Deputy Secretary General to appear for a conference. It's rare enough in New York. So it's even more surprising that this happened this time in Geneva, here outside New York. They both came. And Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, "This is disaster reduction issue, disaster-related issues is indeed one of my priorities." He's clearly stated it, and it was one good word that I had. So that was one thing. Secondly, during this global platform, World Bank came forward and organized this World Reconstruction Conference within the framework of platform. I thought it was, there are many, many events. I thought they were all very interesting. And the World Bank was represented by a very, very senior person, Sri Mulyani Indrawati, one of the managing directors of the bank, who used to be the Indonesia's finance minister. And she was one of those who really took charge of the Aceh reconstruction, along with another gentleman called Mr. Kuntoro. So she came and gave us a very, very good and encouraging words, saying that while respecting the convening power and authority of the United Nations, World Bank is ready and willing to collaborate and work very closely with the UN organization and the system, something to that effect. Of course, the involvement of World Bank as the premier development organization is very important when we talk about disaster and reconstruction from disaster issues. So World Bank's deeper commitment is not only important, it is a very, very welcome. So these two things happened during this platform event, and I was very, very encouraged. One, and they have adopted or discussed the chairman's summary, which contains a number of interesting things. But one thing which was very lightly mentioned, which I would like to call your attention, is the fact that despite this mounting and increasing workload and responsibility of ISDR, its financing is really not good enough. In fact, I stand to be corrected, but I think it's true that ISDR Secretariat is funded 100% out of the extra budgetary source. In other words, not $1 comes from the UN's central budget. Everything depends on voluntary contributions. Now, this was as it was when I was in charge. So I went to the Secretary General and pleaded for some funding, if not 100%, 50% or whatever, should come from the central budget. I brought it up at the senior management meeting, and I presented the position, explained it. They all smiled at me, and then nothing happened. And that still is the case. I would hope that the fact that Secretary General himself has come this time and publicly and clearly stated this is his priority, one of his priorities, he should take the trouble of ensuring that at least one or two positions in the SDR is funded out of the central regular budget, rather than depending fully on extra budget. So that's one thing. And as I said, the pledge was made by the Japanese government to readiness to host the 2015 third United Nations World Conference on Disaster Action. There has to be a great deal of preparation that needs to be made, and certainly we will be working very closely with ISDR Secretariat in order to prepare the international community for this conference, so that real progress can be made in terms of moving forward more strongly in the implementation of the Hyogo framework for action and other action agendas. World Bank hopefully will be better and more effectively involved in the whole process. I'm sure that to be ready to do that. And efforts will continue to be made to make the global platform process much more broad-based, and so that it will get good political buy-in in the later stages. So these are some of the issues that we will be tackling with in the years ahead. There are points that are nothing new, and some new emphasis. I'm not going to, again, spend time going over all these. I simply would like to note one or two points. Points I'm sure that you will also share with me. One is the number of countries, new emerging donors that are making their presence and impact increasingly felt, and I would count among them, at the top of the list, China, countries such as China, India, and Brazil, the BRICS. They certainly are increasingly present in many places, and particularly in China. If you go around in Africa, as I do often, Chinese presence and their activity omnipresent. And they are one of the most active players in the African scene. But similar things are happening more or less in other parts of the world, certainly in Asia, in Southeast Asia, and even in Latin America, South America, where I came away from. I was there only 2 weeks ago. Chinese presence. Same thing, perhaps to a little bit less extent. India is getting increasingly active, and so is Brazil. So this is one factor which I think has already started impacting in the development world. Development world has so far, for long, been dominated by OECD developed countries. Japan is a non-Asian donor country. There was the only non-Asian developed OECD aid donor country present on the OECD Development Assistance Committee for over 40 years. Recently, there was a very welcome addition, and that was of the Republic of South Korea. So there are now 2 representations from Asia in the OECD DAC. However, the rising power of these new emerging donors, I think, will make a difference, and it is already making a difference in Africa and elsewhere. So that is one factor that I think we would like to take good note of. Second is the increasing awareness of the need to get the private sector more involved in development process. For good reasons. Of course, that is where the money is. Tax money, which constitute the normal development budget, is not increasing so much in many countries, certainly not, I'm afraid, in Japan, but in other countries due to economic difficulties, tax money-based development fund is not going to increase that much. Whereas the private sector money, that is where it is. And also, I think it is important to take note that many developing countries, including Africans, of course, they would like to have development aid, but they are, of course, genuinely interested in more in trade and investment, private money, private source money. They made that point very, very clear. in the course of the conference that Japan organizes every 5 years for African countries, the process we call TICAD, Tokyo International Conference for African Development. African leaders, over 40 of them came to Yokohama a couple of years ago, and they made it very, very clear to all of us, yes, we would of course need money for humanitarian and some development work, but what we are really interested in is more investment, more trade, and that is where our real desire is, and maybe no doubt about it. Some of you may have read a book published, I think, about a year ago, book written by a Zambian lady scholar, businesswoman, Dambisa Moyo, a book entitled Dead Aid. I read it. There are some oversimplification of issues in some areas, but there is one part which she made it very clear, that was there are increasingly money available in the private sector, and continuing giving money as aid creates aid dependency, which in the long term, of course, is not healthy. So in that book, she argued strongly against some form of aid. As I said, there are certain simplifications, oversimplifications, but the basic thrust there is something that I think we need to pay attention to. So that's my second point. Thirdly, the point I'd like to emphasize is it is normal practice for aid organizations such as JICA to work with governments. Of course, we have to work with governments, but in many cases, that is not enough to get the impact of our assistance reach to where we would like our assistance should go and its impact felt, and that is the community level. One approach we emphasize, or one concept, or one approach we would like to emphasize in this regard is that of human security, the concept of human security. This again is something that came up in the United Nations now more than 10 years ago. My president, Sadako Ogata, used to chair the Human Security Advisory Commission at one point in order to clarify the concept and introduce it to the international community. The concept of human security can mean many things, but in fact it, in terms of practical operation for an agency such as JICA, is really to make sure that impact is felt at the community level, at the people's level, so that the people are well fed, their health is well maintained, the poverty issues are addressed, and so on and so forth, so that people become free of hunger, and they also become free of destitution, and also they therefore can maintain their integrity. Now, these are some things that may go without saying, but the introduction of concepts such as human security, I think, is useful in making sure that what we do as development aid agency achieves the original objective that it is intended for. So that's again another thing. I'd like to conclude my remarks by sharing with you one thought that I have personally entertained for some time, and this relates to reform of the United Nations. And when you refer to reform of the United Nations, normally what is talked about is reform of the Security Council. The Security Council, as it was formed, is outdated. Things have changed, our relationship have changed from the time that it was framed back in 1945, immediately after the end of the Second World War. So there's been a lot of discussion and talk. I was personally involved as permanent representative in New York to work on this, but I'm not going to dwell on it. When we talk about reform of the United Nations, that of the Security Council is one issue. Another aspect is, I think, the need for the United Nations to better equip itself to deal with issues that really matter today and in the world of tomorrow. Those are those issues. Many issues, but issues particularly important that we should bear in mind are those generally referred to as global issues. Global issues. And disaster prevention, perhaps, or mega disaster related issues, one of such issues. It's easy to think of many other so-called global issues. I think climate change is a typical, global issues that we can call global. Infectious diseases, again, so population growth and all the related problems, others. There are many cross-cutting, large issues that should be dealt with by the United Nations. The United Nations is more effectively, hopefully more coherently, and more. However, in my view, the UN system as it exists is not terribly well equipped to deal with it. So my own argument is to turn one council in the United Nations, which is dormant, that has already played its historic role, that of the Trusteeship Council, and turn that council into what you might call Global Issues Council, or better perhaps, Human Security Council. You have Security Council, which deals with political and security issues, but not really human security related issues. So whether you call it global issues or human security, it matters less. But the important thing is to have a central council as one of the main bodies of the United Nations in order to help member states address those issues of global nature, of cross-cutting nature that affect people at community level, at individual level, rather than the state sovereignty issues as such. So those are the one aspect of reform of the Security Council that I personally have been arguing for. Very few people seem to listen. I don't know how much you would be interested in these issues, but that's one change that I hope will happen in the United Nations. So I should like to stop there. Sorry again, it's been a rumbling and it's not a well-structured lecture. It's certainly, I do not deserve to be the first of this august RedTalk, but I certainly have appreciated it, and thank you once again to IFCR, Secretary General Mukesh, for inviting me to this audience. Thank you very much. I'll be prepared to take a few questions.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
So much.
My name is Ariel Kestens. I work for the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Thank you, Mr. Oshima, for your presentation. Your career is impressive and it's a good example for many of us. Also, thank you for the great work that JICA does, contributing to improve the life of people around the world. My question is in relation to a dilemma I think JICA, or actually the government of Japan, is facing or will eventually face in relation to how to distribute the funds, the funds that they collect through the tax, as you mentioned, and the dilemma between helping the own population in Japan and population spread in other countries around the world. And if you can share with us some of the elements of that discussion that I'm sure the government is having in this very moment.
Thank you, Mr. Oshima, for these presentations, and also thank you for the IFRC for inviting our school. I'm part of Thunderbird, and tomorrow we've got 20 students graduating from an executive MBA after 18 months of studying. They will return to their own organization, and building on your comments on get the private sector more involved, as future leader of private sector organizations, what would be your recommendations to better influence the contributions of the private sector? The school is Thunderbird, School of Global Management in Arizona, Geneva, and Moscow.
Bhupinder Toma, country head, Vietnam, for IFRC. Thank you, Excellency, for your time today, and also, once again, condolences from all of us to you and your people in Japan. I have more a request, perhaps, for your comment on potential and your reflection on partnership between the Red Cross, Red Crescent, and JICA. You know, for an institution with the reach to local communities that you so eloquently talked about in reaching the aid of impact and aid effectiveness, do you see potential for a partnership between the Red Cross, Red Crescent, and JICA, and if yes, in what form and shape that could be? Thank you very much.
After this accident, of course, there is a very big, serious debate going on in the country at the moment, obviously. Making the issue perhaps a little more serious is the fact that researchers and geologists and seismologists have been warning that there may be another major earthquake that may strike the Tokyo area or the western part on the Pacific rim of Japanese archipelago. And there are one or two nuclear reactors that exist in this potentially affected area that may be affected. And replay of what we have been seeing in Fukushima may happen again. So the government has decided to close one of those in the western part of the country, which supposedly is exposed to this potential earthquake and tsunami in future. Now, so there is a lot of serious and debate is going on. I don't know how this is going to end up, whether more closures will follow, or that is one option. Another outcome could very well be stop building planned new ones, and maintain the ongoing nuclear reactors and make best use of it. It's hard to tell what will be the outcome, but certainly the current nuclear power accident is already affecting on our lives very much. In first instances, power cut is very very serious power-saving measures we have to introduce already this summer. Last summer in Japan it was very, very hot, unusually hot. But if this coming summer is going to be hot, then I'm afraid all of us living in Tokyo and other areas will have to suffer from the consequences. So the impact is already very, very immediate there. So all these factors, and of course the power needs of the industry, if the power shortage, power cuts, then what would be the impact? The very serious situation. And so it's hard to tell what would be the outcome, but what I can say for sure is there has to be some very serious thinking about it. Now, I think coming to the allocation of resources at a time of great need inside Japan, does the country have, should the country have so-called generosity towards other countries, particularly the developing countries? Yes, there has been some debate, but not to the extent that I thought there may be. There is some debate, not to the extent. Because I think the fact that there is such an outpour of goodwill and expression of solidarity and so on and so forth from all over the world, and including some of the most poor countries, really touched the heart of many, many Japanese. And people ask why, why countries like Mongolia, Afghanistan, Sudan, and some other countries which are normally the recipient of Japanese assistance, ODA and other form of assistance, why such poor countries and people come out and give whatever they have to try and help those affected people in Japan, a prosperous, a developed country. The reason, of course, is not explained by them, but many people in Japan presume that they are grateful to what Japan has done in terms of assistance. And this is the time that they feel to express their sentiment of appreciation and thanks, and no matter how small it might be. Now, that I think is probably one of the reasons why. And as someone who is involved in development work, and for quite some time, if that's the case, I think I have chosen a career which I think is really worthwhile, and for which myself and many, many others involved, either at headquarters or in the field, should take some pride in, if that's the case. So at the moment, I think, despite some of these arguments, this is the time for money to be spent in the country rather than for overseas. Yeah? I don't think politicians will be swayed by that argument. I think the tendency is to maintain as much as possible. Of course, we are not going to be able to increase dramatically because the economy and the financial budget situation is such that, in fact, the ODA budget has been reduced over the past 12, 13 years to a point where Japan is no longer number one or number two aid donor in terms of the amount. It has gone down quite a bit to the disappointment of many involved. But I think the decline hopefully will stop there. Now, concerning the involvement of the private sector, yes, and many Japanese private sector companies are increasingly engaged in the CSR activity, that is for sure. From the ODA side, we are trying to devise ways in which the ODA resources can be matched with the private sector resources. The famous, the so-called PPP, public-private partnership, is one way of doing it, combining the private resources with ODA resources to lay infrastructure, for instance, or the system of infrastructure. For example, the private sector company invest in the operation and management of port authority in Vietnam, for example, or in Indonesia, for example, while the ODA resources, the yen loan, for instance, comes in to help the government, the Vietnamese or Indonesian government, construct the port facilities, infrastructure, the management and operation to be done by the private sector. The construction of the facility itself, infrastructure is done by the, so the combining the two resources or two sources of resources, you can develop projects which are good both for the host country and good for the Japanese private sector. And so forth, and aid money can play some role in facilitating this kind of collaboration. BOP business is another, bottom of the pyramid business, is another way of engaging the private sector, particularly in order to address the needs of the populations at the bottom, the lower layer of society. Is another way of, and this already has been practiced by many other donors. IFRC JICA collaboration, yes, thank you very much for raising it. I have already discussed to some extent with Mukesh when he visited us in Japan some time ago. And the other day, President Konoe visited us to have a little more exchanges. I think there is a lot of scope for collaboration where for projects and in countries where there is mutuality. There is, wherever there is mutuality of interest or complementarity, I think this is quite possible. IFRC, Red Cross, Red Crescent movement, and societies have certain advantages in certain areas where JICA may not be so strong, either in terms of capacity or resources, and in some other areas, the vice versa. So I think if that sort of mutuality or complementarity of interest exists, there is plenty of opportunity. And we are keen to develop that kind of collaboration, not only with IFRC, but we've already been doing with many other actors, international UN agencies and organizations. So we would like to pursue that effort.
Great, thank you very much. I think we need to let you go because I'm conscious of your time. You can follow RedTalk on Facebook, Twitter, on the Federation website, and who knows what other forms of communications we might develop. And some of those comments we will receive, we will pass on to JICA, so the conversation doesn't stop here. And we will definitely be taking up this invitation for the partnership with the Federation. Now, but before you go, I think Sophie has something to give you.
So I also want to thank you very much for being with us today. And we prepared this little gift to show our gratitude. And for people who maybe cannot see, it's a print of the first home of the Red Cross, where Henry Dunant used to live, and where also the first meetings were held. So I really hope you like it, and thank you very much.
This gift to me is just as nice as being crowned as paramount chief in Sierra Leone, or more. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate this.
Thank you, Sophie. I think while Kenzo signs our visitors book, thank you all very much for coming. I don't know, Bekele, if you want to say any words?
Well, I mean, what needs to be said, you have already said. Mr. Oshima, thank you very much for honoring us. It's really a pleasure to sit here and listen to you. Well, I mean, I want to very briefly take you back to your concluding remark where you said UN reform, UN needing to do what needs to be done today, for today and for the future, and how you sort of linked that up to government and then local level growth. It is very important, useful, obviously, that you or governments work with the UN. I mean, it's the UN organization. UN is a government organization in any case. By the same token, governments have effectively participated, actually, in some respects, led the growth of Red Cross, Red Crescent. Now, in terms of flow of resources over the years, there has not been a balance properly stricken between the UN and the Red Cross. We are 187 national societies today. We link up with government, we link up globally as a network, but at the same time, most importantly, we link with the people at grassroots level. We have reached a stage in our growth where we can make a tremendous lot of difference because we have built capacity over the years at grassroots level, at regional level, at national level, and again, equally importantly, at the network together. Now, where we lack is the link up. We have linked up in terms of policy, growth, etc., with governments. Where we are struggling is to link up the flow of resources in such a way that it is critically balanced between UN and civil society, in particular civil societies that have our kind of link. And there are not many, I can assure you. So the message I would want to leave with you is to help this link up into the future, because you know the Red Cross, you know the UN, you know governments as well. So thank you for coming. And now please, let's be partners and remain partners in linking up.